here.
And I just started recording the meeting.
Oh, great. Okay. So this is a special monthly meeting of the Princeton Historic Preservation Commission being held electronically via Zoom on October 12th, 2020 at 4 p.m. Pursuant to Section 13 of the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of the time and place and agenda of this meeting has been transmitted by copy to Princeton Packet, Town Topics, The Times, Trentonian, and by filing a copy with the Clerk of Princeton, which has been posted to the municipal website, www.princetonnj.gov/meetings, pursuant to Executive Order 107, due to the state of emergency in New Jersey regarding COVID-19 coronavirus. Notice that during the declared state of emergency, all regular and special meetings of the Princeton Historic Preservation Commission will be held electronically via Zoom and transmitted to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, Times, and the clerk, filed with the clerk. Such notices have been placed on the official bulletin board in the municipal complex and on the website, and are to be maintained throughout the year. So Elizabeth, do you want to do the roll or?
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Capizzoli?
Yeah, I'm here.
Ms. Tazzler?
Here.
Mr. Endersby?
Me too.
And Zumbush? Not yet. Mr. Shore?
I'm here.
Ms. Satterfield? Mr. Shatskin?
Here.
Mr. White?
Here.
Ms. Campbell? Absent.
I think I heard Robert in the background saying I'm here, but he's not on the screen.
I did too. I thought I heard him, but I don't see him.
Is he in the attendees? Does somebody have to elevate him to?
He is not.
Okay. That's unusual. Where did that voice come from?
I think it was Elric.
Okay. All right. Well, if he comes in, we'll let him in. So Elizabeth, do you have any announcements?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. I just wanted to remind everybody we have a meeting next week. So I really appreciate everybody showing up, especially just for this. There are 3 concept reviews. So there's really no voting this meeting. It's just our input on the Witherspoon Street improvements, on the Palmer Square bus shelter, and then on 180 John Street. So that's the entire meeting. It's all concept. Deanna, do you want to start off with the Witherspoon Street improvements? And I know you can share your screen.
Thanks, Julie. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So many of you attended our Witherspoon Street concept planning back in February, and some also attended in September. And we're moving ahead in finalizing the concept for the portion of Witherspoon Street between Nassau Street and Green Street. And so we've been working with T&M Associates. Tejal Patel and Kyle Humphreys are both here in support of this project. There are consultants on this project, and I also have Ian Baker, who is named Deanna Stockton right now, is also on the line. So as needed, any of us may jump in during this presentation. So last week we met as a follow-up with the business stakeholders along the street, and talk through some different ideas. One of the things that came up in our last meeting is, sorry, there we go. What was our goal for the project? What are we really seeking as our goal to improve Witherspoon Street? And so I presented this at the meeting on Friday, and we talked through it a little bit with some of the council representatives. You know, we're looking to preserve what is so good and the best about Princeton, but we also want to enhance the economic vitality downtown. So we had a lot of discussion about what that looks like. So this is what we have now. It's a very car-centric roadway, not a lot of pedestrian facilities, very, very limited area to do something other than drive and park. And people have enjoyed the outdoor dining. We know with COVID, this is a kind of a bubble time, and we don't really know what the future holds. But there have been some great just opportunities to really re-envision the street with what we did with one-way traffic. So as you all are aware, we do have historic areas that we need to work with. I've shown in the red circle is our project limits, and a majority of the project area is covered by a historic district. Hence why we're with you tonight. And so when we looked at different options to change Witherspoon Street, we had put out 5 different options, and they were a combination of one-way and two-way operation for motor vehicles, as well as closed to motor vehicles. And it's a very non-scientific proposal, but this is where we are as of last week with feedback from the community. And again, we have no demographics. We don't know who was participating in our survey. This is what we heard. The businesses are concerned about making sure that there's nothing else that inhibits their economic vitality. And so we are really looking closely at what our options are. So as you saw on the survey, the one-way hybrid, or the one-way, is number 1 right now in the very non-scientific survey. So T&M had put this together for us, showing a potential layout of what the road could look like between Nassau and Spring. And just to preface it, these major modifications to the roadway are really envisioned from Nassau to Spring Street, not for Nassau to Green. And so from Nassau to Spring, we could potentially look at a one-way operation. We are waiting for a traffic study, which will give us the impacts of either a northbound or a southbound operation, so that we understand how it fits within the rest of downtown and what the concerns might be. But you'll see right in this area where my cursor is, that's the existing curb line. And again, down here, the existing curb line is at the edge of this kind of peach area. And we'll work with T&M to see if there's a way to shift the road section so that it's more centered within the existing road space. So you have more equal distribution of pedestrian facilities on both sides. But this is one of the layouts. This would be the one-way layout with really changing the dynamic of the roadway to be more pedestrian centric rather than the existing, which had the focus on motor vehicles. And so if we continue down the road, you'll see down by the library, which is outside the district, the real change would be to try to bring some additional parking back into that area to compensate for what's lost in the Nassau to Spring section. And while we show a landscape island potentially down here by Green Street, I don't know if that's going to stay, but it is put there just as a concept idea. So again, even down by Princeton Cemetery and the Arts Council, we're really not looking to change too much, maybe add a little bit of green. The green that's shown on all of these plans is potentially area for green infrastructure. So we would bump out curbs and put green landscaped areas in to help with stormwater management. So that's what you're seeing represented here on the plan. So this is the idea for a one-way. A two-way, depending on how we configure it, we had options that we showed the business community where we put parking on one side or the other, and then we had some discussion about flip-flopping the parking from east to west as you went along the length of the road, and also dropping in a mid-block crosswalk in this area by the South Tulane Yard. So those are still options if we do determine that the two-way operation is the best for the foreseeable future. Again, with a two-way option down here by the library, the only change would be just moving the bus stop a little bit, the current bus stop, and installing some parking. But one thing we're still working out in regards to transit is whether or not New Jersey Transit will operate on a one-way road. They typically like to go two-way on one route and not have to change roads. And so we're going to be meeting with them hopefully later this week to discuss that further. But to jump into more of the meat of this discussion, we wanted to start showing you some concepts of the things we're looking to incorporate into the design, regardless of if we're one-way or two-way. But really looking at how can we make the road flexible, because this is our only opportunity probably for the next 30 years to really reimagine the road. That's about how often we touch roads in Princeton typically. And so first we have some ideas for green infrastructure. That's a lot of what this slide is showing you, but it's also showing in the lower slides and the upper right, the idea of maybe a curbless road or less of a curved road to provide opportunities to potentially seamlessly change the roadway. So in this upper right corner, you'll see we've got this parking area that's shown, and it's distinguished from the road section by a concrete gutter. This is an idea that I really am interested in as providing an opportunity, because it could allow us to extend the pedestrian use into those parking areas at off times. And I also like the idea on this picture of the overhang, the larger overhang and the awning. So whereas currently during COVID, we've been putting the dining right next to the travel way of the road in the parking stalls. An idea like this one, you could utilize that overhang, have the dining closer to the building, and then the pedestrians would be closer to the roadway area. So this is something that we'd really like to consider going forward. More green infrastructure you see on this slide. Switching over, these are 3 different images again of where you have this, a little bit of a shared space. The Dutch call it a wooner. It's like your living room. And so again, this is a Seattle picture in the bottom left. We've got a picture from Denver in the top. Again, just look, these are kind of like the big picture concept ideas of how we're trying to approach the road to make it the most flexible we can. And then I pulled up, this is our sidewalk design that we were looking at from the Nassau Streetscape that we would look to incorporate into the sidewalk space on Witherspoon Street as well. And then one thought we had in the parking aisles, instead of just regular asphalt, one idea would be to look at stamped asphalt. And these are a couple of images. I think you've got Jersey City in the top right. You've got Newark in the center, and I'm not sure who is in the bottom left, but it is being used around New Jersey. And it could be an interesting way to dress up those parking aisles so that they can have multiple uses and possibly pedestrian uses. And then I think this is my last slide, just to give you an idea about another piece of the project. We're also looking at doing 2 more things with this project besides just reconstructing the roadway and the sidewalks. We're looking at replacing existing lighting. And so you see in the middle of the screen, this is an image of our existing lights. These are currently owned and maintained by the town, and what we're looking at doing is to replace the existing fixtures with something that's owned and maintained by PSE&G, as most of our lighting system in town is already under their purview. So I have 2 images that Michael Laplace, our planner, had found. I think these are examples from Westfield. And these are PSE&G lights for consideration. And I'm sure Michael may have an opinion on the dual head versus the single head. The idea with our lighting is we would like the opportunity to continue the flower baskets, but we'd also like the opportunity to have a taller light fixture that could allow for vertical banners on them as well. So that's part of the reasoning for switching over. I know I have concerns because you do have residential on the 2nd floors of the buildings, and so we would need to look at some sort of a cutoff or shield on any type of light that we might propose. And then lastly, over here on the left is just couple of examples of wayfinding that we're looking at incorporating into the project. The far left, this is the example that was in the Nassau Streetscape guidelines, and captioned below were the comments from HPC regarding the design of that. And I'll just read it out to you, that the fluted base of the pedestrian signage pole was viewed by HPC as excessive. A simpler base is recommended. So that's what we would work with T&M Associates to come up with a simpler pole. And then again at Spring Street, this is some of the improvements that we're proposing outside of the district, just to really reinforce that this is a public parking space, because often we've heard that people don't know where the parking garage is. So that in a nutshell is what we have for you today. I've gone very fast, and any of my team feel free to jump in, but we welcome the opportunity to have a discussion with HPC about all of these ideas, and it will help us shape the project moving forward.
Thanks, Deanna. So to me, I see it as 5 different mini discussions. One is about what kind of vehicle traffic there is. One is about the curbless issue. One is about stamped concrete or some kind of texturing. One is about the lights, and then one is about the wayfinding. So, I mean, those seem to be the areas that I saw as the main discussions. So maybe we could just go one by one. So the first one is the one-way versus two-way versus, was no traffic ever discussed, or?
It was discussed. There was a lot of concern from the business community that we don't have the density and the activity downtown to support a full closure.
Mm-hmm.
And there really was like a dichotomy of opinions among the different business owners. I think we would like to design this space to allow for closures potentially, like on a Sunday once a month, or Saturday and Sunday, or Friday, Saturday nights, so that it can be programmed for different activities or for bands and that type of thing. But at this point, we just don't think the town is ready to have this section of roadway closed completely.
Okay, so I guess if we could go back to the grid layout, I can see people raise their hands and stuff.
So stop sharing your screen, Deanna,
Yeah,
Okay, oh, sorry.
so we can see everybody.
The grid,
All right.
thank you.
Yes.
thank you. So first of all, with the vehicle traffic, one-way versus two-way, does anyone have any comments on that? I mean, it's not directly affecting the architecture, but it does influence the feeling of the street.
Well, where's the traffic going to go? I mean, it's so seriously curtailed, and particularly something like Tulane, it seems awkward. I can. It's the same thing with Paul Robeson Place. I mean, it seems like those streets have a big part of making this work, and I'm wary of it, frankly.
Yeah, this is really a theory question for, I think, council to weigh in on of, where do we envision ourselves in the next 25 or 30 years? And does every road need to serve all vehicular uses? I mean, it goes back to our complete streets discussion of, does every road have to be everything to everybody? And where can you make small changes and accept the impacts of those small changes? And so that's where we'll have the traffic study. So we'll have an informed basis to make a decision. But yes, there will be a ripple effect, and it will impact other locations. And so I think it's just weighing, how much we value making this corridor pedestrian centric versus moving vehicles in a timely fashion.
If I could make a comment, Elric, my perception of going southbound on Witherspoon heading towards Nassau is it's terribly non-functional right now because of the student pedestrian traffic. So you get a lineup of cars trying to turn either right or left, and maybe one car gets through cycle. So giving up one car per light cycle doesn't seem like a big sacrifice to me, traffic-wise. I think people will find but that's just my perception of that.
I'd really like to, I mean, I know you've been over it with the Merchants Association, but Charlottesville, Virginia, and Ithaca, New York are both great college towns. Ithaca's probably a little smaller than Princeton population-wise, and Charlottesville is much larger, but they both have pedestrian malls at the center of their downtowns, and they're just incredibly successful. Particularly Charlottesville, when they created the mall there, the downtown was really sketchy, and there was a lot of skepticism about it, but it's just been a huge boost to that community, and it's hopping. I mean, it's just, and they have tables out in the middle of what had been the street, so with pedestrians on either side. And Ithaca too, and there are probably metrics that would have to be looked at, but I think there's such dynamic, interesting places that I would really encourage trying to stay on that a little bit longer. If it weren't for COVID, I would say y'all should take a field trip down to Charlottesville, but
I think the thing that
I think it would be really great.
these towns have
Yeah,
different
I've been down there and I understand what, sorry, Alric, I understand what you're saying.
the grid. Though,
Definitely.
we only have Wiggins, or the multi-named street, because the university campus, takes up such a large section on the other side. I can see, 206 is a problem. I was hoping really when the Stony Brook Bridge was closed that truck traffic could be rerouted somehow to get it off of 206. That isn't happening. I can see deliveries being allocated the time slot from like 5:30 till 7:30 in the morning or something like that. But otherwise, it just seems like it's going to, the ripple effect is going to go into residential areas. Front yards are going to be cut off to create extra lanes. Residential parking is going to be more restrictive, and it's lovely to see people in these illustrations sort of wandering around on the streets, but we have to remember that we are an individual town, and our grid and the circumstances of public, private, commercial traffic are all going to be different from other communities.
All right, does anyone else have like a viewpoint on one-way versus two-way versus no cars?
I have several views on it, and I think
Okay.
the start would be that no town has ever rebuilt their business vitality by improving or over improving their street environment. In fact, it can become way too uncomfortable and difficult. And I think part of what's being discussed here is pedestrian friendly. But remember that there are a lot of pedestrians that have to drive to the downtown to start shopping there. And some of the illustrations you were showing earlier were in larger cities where there's a tall high-rise residential buildings, and there's a lot of people to go downstairs and walk out on the streets and patronize the businesses. We don't have that environment. We do have a university, but after about 3/4 of a mile, you're not reaching the population that you want to come and patronize on a regular basis. I think also that one-way street pairings become very confusing to visitors. And a certain amount of what Princeton is becoming is a visitor destination. And if you put a one-way street in the key center area of downtown, that just kind of throws people off and will throw traffic onto the narrower streets of Chambers and some of the others. And that's kind of unfair. And then the whole bump out thing is just bump out and greenery from a historic preservation point of view of the streetscape having some integrity left. It's a big problem. Ludicrous. I have lots more about this other people talk.
Well, let's, so are there any other comments? Because I really thought we'd separate these issues. I think it's just a clear discussion that way. So, I mean, I don't think there's really any consensus about one way or two-way or no traffic. I mean, I'm kind of hearing everything. Roger?
And I was just curious if there were any lessons from, we've had one way now, at least for the one block, for 5 months or so. Has anybody been charting difficulties with that, or any complaints? Or I mean, we have a pilot project going on right now.
Yeah, there are no complaints that I'm aware of. I think the configuration that we put in place it's only about 20 feet wide between the drive lane and or the area reserved for vehicles. So we have found that is actually a little tight, And so if you get a box truck parked in the curbside pickup area and you have another box truck or garbage truck that wants to drive next to it, it's very tight. But other than that, I'm not aware that we've had any issues, any concerns. You will hear that traffic volumes are down, and so this may not be a full representation of a pilot study, but that's part of what the traffic engineers will be doing is they're pulling historic data and they'll be running it through the different scenarios to see what happens. Like, you know, if traffic was in 2018 pre-COVID or 2019, what's the impact? So that's what they're going to be looking at. But with our new design for the one-way, we are allowing for wider sections so that you don't have that conflict between, say, a parked car and a moving vehicle.
And
Right.
I'd like to
Go
speak.
ahead. Yes, Robert.
I share some of Elric and David's concerns. I think that's one reason why perhaps, particularly since this is an unusual time now, I'm not sure this is the time to build something that's permanent. I think it should be something that's flexible that could be altered as times change. Things may turn out quite differently in another year or so. And I think the other thing is the bump outs really are not appropriate historically. I think that's always something that's a problem. The linearity of the street is really an important concern. I think that it's unlikely that given the nature and the fact that there aren't that many other alternative streets, that totally eliminating the traffic would work. It's possible that one way would, and it would have to be in the direction that was proposed, I think. But even so, I think that anything done, if we do something really permanent now and put a lot of effort into that, we don't have the ability to reassess it after a couple of years when conditions really will be different.
All right, so there's a number of different views on the direction of traffic, and we're kind of segueing into the curbless versus curbed issue. So a few people have weighed in that they are, I guess more clarity on curbless versus keeping the curb. Are there more on, is there more on that? David?
Julie, I just wanted to make a point. I appreciate the observation that a linear street is really historically appropriate, but I do want to make sure that everyone on the commission realizes that the bump outs are not an aesthetic intervention. They're there for two reasons. One is for stormwater management. And with climate change, I think that it's something that the commission just needs to take really seriously, is that we do not have the same rainfall characteristics that we had as a city 50 years ago or 30 years ago. We get a lot more intense rainfall in short events, and we do need to do something to mitigate that. And so that's a big piece why the bump outs are there. And the other thing is pedestrian safety. Because when you have the bump outs, you have a shorter distance for pedestrians to cross the street. And it really has been proven to be a significant contributor to pedestrian safety and reduction of injuries and even fatalities. So, like I started out to say, I appreciate the desire to have a historic streetscape, but these are not aesthetic interventions. They're really practical interventions and quite crucial.
I find it hard to believe that the small quantity of bump outs would really do a major, I've looked at a number of different situations for stormwater management, and I certainly approve of that attack, but I don't think in this case there's enough there to really change it significantly, and that there are other ways of handling the stormwater.
I'll let the
I think
engineers
also
address
as far
that.
as safety is concerned, I mean, I think that also, there are other ways of, I think we don't need bump outs for that.
David, I find it telling that you call Princeton a city, and even claim that it's been a city for 50 years. To me, it's always been a town, although I suspect that what's really at the base of all of these discussions is the fact that the town is becoming a city. And that is terrifying to me.
Mini city.
Well, one thing I do know, I think about in terms of pedestrian traffic is that I do feel that people on the street appreciate the architecture far more than if they're in a car. Like, if there's more room for pedestrians, they'll be more intent on keeping, the good structures that we have and maybe appreciating them more. So in some ways, I feel that improving the pedestrian experience can help preserve the buildings in a way. On the other hand, there's a lot of changes here. So I guess if there's any other comments on the curbless issue and the bump outs, I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in on that.
So,
I just wanted to jump in on a couple things. Sorry, David, why don't you go and then I'll do a rebuttal at the end. Oh, David, sure. Sorry to interrupt you. You can go ahead.
hello?
Yeah.
So curbless sidewalks, yet we have to have bump outs at the corners to protect the pedestrians. I guess I don't follow that logic.
Curbless would be where you have bollards or potentially are parking meters to separate the parking lane from the pedestrian way. And this may not even be possible on this roadway because of all of the doorways and the entrances to businesses. Tejal shaking her head. But we just want to put it out there as an option for consideration, for our consideration in making the road as flexible as possible. Because again, we don't know what's happening with personal vehicles in the next 25 years. We could all be operating in pods that are self-driven and nobody owns their own vehicle anymore. And so that's why we're looking at what opportunities do we have to make some changes that won't look dated in about 20 years. And so that's why the curbless idea comes out. But as Tejal shakes her head and says, maybe grade wise it's not possible, but maybe we go for a 2-inch curb or we do something different. That's really the idea of what we're getting at. So maybe it's not a full 6-inch curb, but something smaller to extend the pedestrian space.
Yeah, if I wanted to chime in a little bit in here, because we're now talking about curbs and the kind of design aspect of it. The main project goal here that we had established prior to even starting the concept was safety for all users. And I understand that the region is very historic, and it has to have that historic feeling. But I think the design will follow safety for all users, may it be like pedestrians, cyclists, transit riders, drivers in general. And the goal was improved environmental performance, because DEP, starting I think March 21, 2021, or March 2nd, 21, wants us to incorporate some type of green infrastructure in any of the projects that we are constructing. I mean, that is one of the reasons why, again, environmental performance and as well as certain restrictions, stormwater management. And I think Kyle's going to jump in here and help me out on this. I'm trying to make a case for bump outs as to why they would be required. One would be safety, and second would be stormwater / environmental performance for the whole project. The third would be the improved road operations and traffic flows, which again, the traffic engineer is going to chime in once he has all the traffic data and the ADTs. I think the last ADT that I saw on this road was from 2007, which was about a little over 7,000 cars, average annual daily traffic. But that was in 2007. That would be a lot different now. So considering all these aspects, I think we have to think about the safety, how you're going to convey the stormwater management with either a 2-inch curb face or a 4-inch curb face or a 6-inch curb face. I think these are also important to be considered along with the historic value of the whole road. I don't know what decision you guys are going to make regarding the traffic flow and the pattern, but I think I cannot press enough regarding the safety, and which I think curb bump outs and all those things enhance it. It has been proven. It is a very widely accepted concept. It though doesn't retrofit the linear flow of what you have right now, but it does help to check those boxes that have been listed as project goals when we applied for grants for this project. And Deanna, if I am wrong, correct me. I think this was considered. And
Safety, environmental, yeah.
And I think we have to consider all this as a holistic approach, not just as a historical approach, or not just as a safety approach, or not just environmental performance. And that's
and I want to be clear too, that we're still keeping the linearity of the roadway. That's not changing. It's just better utilizing the edges of the roadway. If I go back to that picture of the roadway, I'm just trying to get back to that if I can. It's just better utilizing the space where the parked cars are, right? You've got trees that are really impacted and not in healthy situations because of their proximity to buildings and to parked cars. And it gives us a few more opportunities to enhance this as a place that people want to get to and stay a while at rather than drive through. So that's what we were looking at. And so maybe you are replacing where this person is jaywalking. You put in a crosswalk, and where the Olives truck and the little blue Subaru is, you have a little bit of a bump out to protect the parking area with a green strip. That's what we're looking at. So many of the crashes in this corridor are based on people either parking, like sideswiping an adjacent car, or hitting a car as they come out of a parking space. So again, we're looking at the safety of all users, including the motor vehicle users, to better imagine this space rather than this very confined, actually congested road area for motor vehicles.
What time of day was this shot taken? I can see it's the morning, but is it like 10 o'clock or is it?
Yeah, this is from Google Street View. I would say it's probably anywhere from 8 to 10 because of the garbage trucks.
Well, that's the sort of thing I'm thinking about.
Right.
You know, I've known Princeton well at 5:30 in the morning for years, and that would certainly, if you start taking out the trucks and the garbage truck and whatever, and the delivery trucks, that's a start. One thing I want to get back to though is I'm glad this discussion is going on, and it probably is a good time because this is a different situation. But I'd be interested in, first of all, when a lot of your statistics were drawn, if it was before or after the beginning of the shutdown. At this point, you talk about university students crossing the street. Well, university students aren't here. And I'm interested, I see some of the storefronts are empty, which is obviously a troubling sign. But what about the offices downtown and the people who are there every day? Do we have any sense of how many of them may be going to a home situations where fewer people are traveling to those offices? Or it seems like there are a lot of factors right now that ought to be assessed, because we may already be, you talk about the possibilities 30 years from now, but what are the possibilities in 2 years, say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that our traffic engineer will be looking at and running through in different scenarios. So their data will be pre-COVID, but they will also do some traffic counts at this time as well, just to get a sense of how different it is from what occurred previously. And then they'll work to create, the going forward scenarios as to the change over time. We've been working with DOT because they're also looking at the Nassau-Witherspoon intersection to replace the traffic signal. And I mean, they're still using a 1% per year increase in traffic. So they haven't changed at this point based on COVID. A lot of the ideas that we had for the roadway, I think, for me at least, came after the February meeting pre-COVID. In my opinion, I thought the best way to make the road work, the bare minimum, was to take out one lane of vehicles. And so whether that leaves you with one-way traffic and 2 lanes of parking, or 2 lanes of traffic and 1 lane of parking, I just thought say like a 30-foot road fits better in that space than a 39-foot road. And so that was my opinion going into COVID and everything else that occurred. So that's the opportunity to switch and try out the one-way during COVID, I thought was great, because that was already one of my concepts, looking at that as an option. So I know with Elizabeth, we've had some discussion about just scale of sidewalks versus vehicular space versus buildings. And I don't know if there's any feedback related to that, like existing sidewalks are 9 feet. If we went to 15-foot sidewalks, which you probably have 15 to 20 foot on Nassau Street, is there any issue, concerns, aesthetics, scale that we need to think about? But again, some of that too can be offset as we use that space for green infrastructure to hold and to treat the stormwater runoff.
Well, I have to say, I was down in this section of town last Saturday, probably around 7, and I was shocked by the number of pedestrians. It was, in fact, my son said, "Is this New York City?" Because it was really packed. I mean, there were people everywhere. Now the weather was really good, but I was really shocked how many people were out on the street. It was kind of amazing. So it's not like it's empty right now.
Can I ask about parking?
Factors that you don't have sidewalks, all these empty, people still come through our downtown for what it is. It's kind of mind-boggling been in that position many times. It's not a lot of fun to say to them, do you want to have less parking on your block, or do you want to have people only be able to see you half the time by going in one direction, not being two-way streets? I would be amazed if you didn't get much pushback on that.
Yeah, certainly businesses are going to have definitely opinions. I'm just wondering if we could go on to
Can I just say one more thing?
Yes.
Yeah, I know that from other towns, historic towns, often in the past, there were large things, displays of merchandise and so on, put out on the sidewalks and so on. And Elric probably knows to what extent this was done in Princeton. But for that reason, I think that one thing that might work, and again, I would like to stress, I think that in the next few years, we should do something which is flexible and can be changed, because I think there are going to be changes and we should be able to respond to them. But instead of bump outs, the use of planter boxes, which is not unlike, I mean, I can think in Nantucket where there are these carts with vegetables and so on being out in that area. And that sort of a thing could also narrow the street at the ends where to take care of the safety thing as well. But this could be done on a temporary basis now quite easily. And then in the future, after reassessing it, after this whole COVID thing is over and there are changes, then I think things will be different. Then you can begin to think in terms of something that's really more permanent. And I do think that, you know, I can understand a one-way traffic working. I can see that could work. But I do think also there is a need in many cases for people who just need to stop briefly to pick up something at a store or something like that. And it's very awkward to have to, particularly if it's a large object, to go to the parking garage and that sort of a thing. To park for a long time, I think that makes sense rather than on-street parking. But some means of picking up is, and this has nothing to do with historic preservation, but I do think that way we might also be able to preserve the linearity while still addressing safety and so on, and do something which is in scale with the historic use in the past.
All right. So are there other comments on the bump outs, or should we go on to the stamped asphalt? So one of the things you mentioned was having a stamped asphalt, and maybe you want to go back to that slide just so we can look at it again.
I will.
And that would be like at a crosswalk?
No, so we're looking at it, and Tejal and Kyle, you may want to jump in. One idea is to use it in the parking areas. So if we get to the images, so if you see the image here in the top right corner, this is pavers. But the idea is potentially doing some sort of a concrete gutter and then doing a stamped asphalt in the parking stalls adjacent to the pedestrian space. We've looked at it for the entire roadway. I think we're still working through that because it has a texture, it will be a little bit louder. And so I think we have some concerns about using it in the middle of the road as it's shown in this image, but we're still, you know, gathering details on that. But again, this is what I would be looking at, some sort of a gray tone, and whether it's a running bond, herringbone, whatever type of arrangement, this would be the idea.
And then how is this repaired? Like, let's say you get a pothole where the asphalt gets broken up. How do you fix that?
You would ultimately need the company to come out and restamp it. Mm-hmm. If you actually have the coloring as well, you would fix the coloring at the same time. So it does require more maintenance than just strictly using asphalt. but I think it's more manageable from a maintenance perspective because, I mean, you could look at using concrete and that would increase your flexibility of space. But then if you ever imagine somebody needs to repair a broken utility, they have to cut through the concrete and then dowel and repair all that concrete. The repair time is quite lengthy. So this definitely does have more maintenance requirement than standard asphalt, but it's a nicer product.
What happened to the plans we talked about last year? Has that all been eliminated?
The Nassau Streetscape?
Yeah.
No, we're still using that on the sidewalk. The same idea. This would be the concrete on the sidewalks, and then the tree grates if we don't use if we don't do stormwater, larger stormwater vegetated features.
Mhm.
So it would just utilize this space where the vehicles are parked in this little diagram.
So it wouldn't have any vehicular traffic on it aside from parking.
Correct.
You know, some of the patterns are just very busy, and it seems like a road is a road, but and as it gets patched, it gains character in a way. But those concerns to me are very real. I spend too much time in the third world where that's just the norm. So we have what we designated last year, and then the possibility of that as a strip, and then the possibility of a patterned street as well.
Yeah.
Possibly. And the idea, sorry to interrupt, the idea would just, I think, be from Nassau to Spring.
Okay. Are there, I guess, Deanna, if we could go back to the unshared screen
Yep.
where I could see people. Are there other comments on the asphalt? I mean, I share a lot of Elric's concerns about repairs, just because I wonder potentially how easily that's going to happen.
Hello.
This is.
Yeah, David. Robert? Either one.
This is stamped asphalt in a large sheet. It's not individual asphalt pavers.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, so Robert,
Now,
the way,
I'm not sure there's any great advantage in having stamped asphalt for those areas.
Slightly easier to maintain than the pavers. That's about it.
so the way it is done is you heat the asphalt and you use certain type of stamps, which is about, it could be whatever design or a pattern you want. It can, and then kind of just rolling it on the surface with the machinery that they use. The main look that you get from this type of stamped asphalt is purely aesthetics, and it differentiates the parking lane from the drive lane. And I think the pattern that we can pick would be cohesive enough along in the line of the pattern that you guys picked last year, I think, for Nassau Streetscape, which is the perpendicular parallel pattern. Correct, Deanna? I don't remember.
Rectangular perpendicular, yeah.
Rectangular perpendicular pattern. But again, that was scored concrete, which is somewhat similar. If we want, you can mimic it on the drive lanes, but again, it's going to look very block-like, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an easier way to maintain rather than concrete. You know, I mean, it's stamped, and you can use any design that you want to, any pattern that you want to. You can customize it.
I see, but the main purpose is just for differentiating between the parking area and the drive area. Okay.
Yes.
I
And
think,
aesthetics, I think, right,
Right.
Deanna?
Mhm.
I think that
what?
could,
Aesthetics, the look.
Yes, aesthetics, yep.
I think that could just as easily be done with a white line to differentiate the two. And I don't see any great advantage or aesthetically or otherwise in the stamping in this area. I think it just adds more more confusion.
You know, one thing that we're trying to do in the flexibility of this design is look at that curb space. And so we understand that we need to provide loading space for vehicles, parking space for vehicles, but also have the flexibility that if, you know, a business desires and council approves, that a business could utilize that parking area for something else. And that's why we were looking at a different treatment that's more of a pedestrian treatment in case that space is utilized as something else in a short term.
I'm picturing table legs under with that grid. If it's used for something else.
Well, again, we can score it any different way, and so, you know, I think all of these are pedestrian friendly. The table legs would manage around the score marks.
I seem
Are
to
there-
remember that we had some crosswalks in town that were stamped asphalt and maybe yellow at some point. Maybe I may be misremembering. I know on the corner, our corner at Hamilton and Chestnut and Walnut, there, at least the cutaways, the ramps seemed to be stamped asphalt for a while, and they didn't last. Or my sense of time is shot, but it could have been 10 years or 8 years, but they wore down and the color disappeared within a matter of years.
Roger's exactly right. And the stamp doesn't hold up.
There was a contractor a century ago. I'm trying to think of his name, but he was an Italian, but he became a Presbyterian and got a lot of jobs in town. Had 11 kids and built them all houses around Spruce Street. But his pattern was yellow curbs and crossings and just along the curbs. And there's still some streets in town that have that feature.
Mm-hmm.
Yellow brick.
Right, like Edgewater.
Edge Hill, yep.
Edge Hill.
Yeah, I think there are older versions of stamped concrete that have been tried over the years, I think mainly by the former borough. And the materials have advanced since then. I can't give you a lifetime that they are now stating for these materials, but I know there is a lifetime. And I mean, all roadways within 10 to 15 years should be resurfaced. You know, they should have some sort of a surface treatment. So it's definitely something that the same is true with a stamped asphalt. I think there was a stamped asphalt intersection, I think at Linden and Hamilton. And so you can see
Hamilton
with,
Chestnut.
yeah, so you can see with 10,000 vehicles a day or whatever our ADT is, yeah, it does wear down. And that's one of the reasons why we're looking at just the parking stalls and not necessarily the throughways.
And Hamilton Linden. Both of you are correct.
When Nassau Street was first paved about 1916, I think it was in wooden blocks.
Right, should we do wood back on Witherspoon?
No.
My joke is we'll have the sewers running down the gutter lines too.
Not funny.
So is there more, if there are more comments on the stamped asphalt, if not, we could go on to the lights, because the lights are a big issue.
On stamped surface, where if it gets deteriorated just from trucks driving over the crosswalk, think about cars pivoting and turning and twisting their wheels in and out to get in and out of spaces. And then also, if that's going to be partly loading zone in the morning with big trucks in it, I think it's not going to hold up very well at all. I agree with Robert. Simple, solid materials, and do something with good paint. You see much stronger street regulation painting in Europe, for example, with much wider lines where you can park or not. And that seems to work pretty well. I think trying to be overly decorative and trying to create a sense of space in materials that don't ever really hold up that well. Julie's absolutely right. When you make a repair in one of these stamped areas, you get kind of ugly concrete or asphalt pounded in there that doesn't really match. And you have to look at that for a long time. If it were just asphalt, you could come make a just asphalt repair and it would be less glaring. I think there's a lot to be discussed on this. The thing I would be interested in is how well has stamped asphalt worked in a parking lane or delivery lane. And I think that we would want to know that before we thought that was a good idea to do along the sides of our street.
Okay.
All right, thanks, David. So as far as the lights go, there were the two from PSC&G. One was kind of a tall pole, single, and the other one was a double. I guess my question is, we have all this pressure on, you know, from all the carriers, Verizon, AT&T, they want to put all kind of equipment, you know, we've got the 5G coming and we're really looking to figure out how to handle that. And so lately we've just been telling them, just put your own pole up because we don't want you to mess around with our lights. But I'm just wondering how your view of the new lights would work with the new 5G stuff and all of the other equipment that the street needs to handle.
Elizabeth, I may look to you to help me out on that one because you and Jim have been working more closely on the 5G and what our design guidelines are.
Right. So Jim Purcell, who is our newer land use engineer, and I have been working with Verizon, and they're coming in with a big installation of 5G. We've gone out to the site, we've talked to them about alternate locations in which they could place them instead of just on the street, you know, pole after pole. The question has come up about replacing poles and making it available to extend the pole that has a light fixture on it to accommodate the telecommunication equipment. And what they know, as I had mentioned to them, is, well, you're going to have to see what HPC says about certain poles. So they're the light fixture poles that are on Nassau Street. They're the ones, and there's also the Cobra head poles on Nassau Street as well, which kind of have that vintage bluish color on them. And then there are the poles that are on Witherspoon Street and Palmer Square. But I think that we've got hopefully we've got Palmer Square situated where they're not going to be touching those poles. So that's going to be a question really for HPC. Is there, is the commission going to consider the alteration of the poles? Is that something that they're going to support? And if so, will they support the pole being extended to accommodate the telecommunication equipment? As you know, because we had Jacobs come in, it's going to be 35 to 40 feet high. So I think the commission wants to think about that. Do they want to just keep the light fixtures themselves for lighting? But if you do that, then there is a possibility that you're going to have a lot more poles coming in on the street.
Right, thank you. Yeah, that's my point, is that are we able to accommodate the 5G on top of buildings, or do they need the poles? And then if they need the poles, how many poles are we going to have on these streets if we have lighting separate from the 5G? And, you know, that's a really intensively used area, so they probably want tons of 5G.
Right, but not only that, so you have to also understand it's not only Verizon, it's going to be every other carrier that's going to want to come into town and place their poles too. So we have been encouraging them to look for off-grade installation. As you said, on buildings, we're looking at public buildings, perhaps a library, the Arts Council, churches, those type of facilities that would also benefit from having a leasing agreement from there. I would love to be able to encourage some of the property owners in downtown Princeton also to make their space available, because, you know, one pole off the street is a win. So if we could get more on the buildings without impacting the visual historic character and the, you know, integrity of it, I think that that would be the best. I think that you're not going to be able to eliminate any poles on the street. I think that they're going to end up there somewhere, but it's going to be, are we able to use the Cobra head ones? Is that a light fixture that the commission would consider changing? Or, you know, I'm not sure about the ones, I think that we've already had this discussion when Jacobs came through about the one on Witherspoon Street and the one on Nassau Street as well. So I think that that's going to be something that the commission really has to think about and make a decision, because this Witherspoon Street project, Deanna, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it has, you know, they're working towards finalizing this because of grant funding. And I think that it has to be used within a certain amount of time. I think it's 2021. Is that correct? So I think the commission needs to really think hard about what they want to do about lighting, because not only is it going to impact this, but it's going to impact also the 5G that's coming in.
Yeah, and what we're proposing in this section of Witherspoon Street, we would like to see carried all the way along the corridor all the way down to Valley Road. And so to your point, Julie, I just looked up, you know, we do have the one pole that was put in by Crown Castle that has the lower lights, but then has the extension for the 4G antenna. You know, I don't know if this is what another option might be, but I'm just showing you that this has been done in the corridor, and it's really, you know, we look to your guidance of, is this more acceptable than putting another pole right next to a street light?
I think the last one that we reviewed, we decided that it would be better to have a separate pole than to keep changing the street lights, that because there were already quite a few, there's a lot on that sidewalk, and to change the light to make it a double light in that location just seemed very bulky and crowded versus what you just showed, which is in, you know, at a crosswalk at it. Of course, it may change because I think there's a building plan for there, but it's a fairly open area. But I kind of feel like we're kind of limited in how much we can control 5G, that they have so much autonomy when they come in and deciding where they need to go. And, you know, we can put up a lot of poles that will be designed to receive these emplacements, but if it's not enough or it's not quite where they need it to be, they can probably put up another pole. So, I mean, I think all we can really do is do our best to design the poles to be tall enough to have some space for some of these emplacements, but you know, we can't dictate it to them. They kind of have their own autonomy in deciding where it needs to go.
Yeah, Robert, you have a comment?
I had one of the things is, I think we're considering this a pedestrian area or people sitting out and eating and so on. We don't want lights that are really high. They should be low. I think that's really important. That gives a feeling of being friendly to pedestrians, and it also then isn't interfering with the second floor uses and what have you. So I think it's important to keep the lights low, even if it means having a few more lights to make that work.
Mhm.
And
Well,
I
the
think
other thing is
it also
that
reinforces, I mean, probably there were no street lights at all historically and further back, but it also is more appropriate in a historic area, I think, to keep the lights low rather than the very high lights.
Then you'd have to have the bracketed double lights if you're gonna try
Well,
to.
maybe not. I mean, I do agree that I think that to the extent, I mean, after all, even the 35-foot pole isn't as high as most of the buildings. Most of the buildings are even higher, and the buildings is really a better place to put these things. Now, it's unfortunate, but each company can put up its own poles and everything else. And unlike power utilities, which are forced to share, I mean, I think earlier on, we showed pictures in New York City in the 19 teens and what have you, with just this forest of poles and what have you. And of course, it all went underground eventually. But I mean, with each company having its own lines and things like that, it was a mess. And that really is unfortunate, but it's not something that's within our control at all, unfortunately.
Mhm. So yeah, I think yeah, I see both of your points that in some ways we really can't predict what the 5G situation is going to be. And I mean, I do agree with Robert that a lower light is much more pedestrian friendly, friendlier to diners, just more in scale with the buildings, rather than a really tall light pole. But I understand that you want PSE&G to maintain the lights. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. So right now they only have the 2 different lights, or those are the 2 you thought were closest to what we had, or?
That, Michael Laplace felt that those were the most appropriate. I'm trying to think, we looked at a variety. They don't have very many that are of a more historic bent. They have a lot more that are sleeker or more modern fixture.
Well, they don't have to be historic in reproductions of historic fixtures. I mean, that's not really even appropriate by the Secretary of Interior standards. For adding something new, we shouldn't be mimicking something from the past that was never there. I don't have any problems with more modern fixtures. I think the simpler the fixture, the better. Is less intrusive to a historic area than a fake historic thing, which is just not true.
So let me ask this question. Is the commission married to the existing fixtures that are out there now? Would they be not opposed to them being replaced with something newer, or would they prefer to keep those themselves, not a duplicate, but those that are actually existing? I think that's a basic question.
I guess the question is, how is the condition of the existing poles? I mean, are they like in bad shape? And if we say, oh, we want to keep those, we're gonna have more problems soon? I mean, it's kind of hard to know.
Yes, they're in bad shape, and with our work, we're going to be removing everything, and to reinstall, 20-year-old equipment is probably not in our best interest. And again, if we want PSE&G to switch over, they're not going to utilize the existing equipment. They're going to put in their own equipment.
And I think they're switching to LEDs, right, Diana? And I don't think the current ones are LEDs. Am I correct? Right.
Yep.
So I think there's a certain set of heights that they come to, and certain types of fixtures that they have. But we're going to have like lighting plans for this project, and we have a lighting engineer that knows that there is an interest for pedestrian level lighting also, correct, Diana? And
yes. Yes, there's not enough lighting for the meters on street right now. And so this is part of the improvement of that situation.
I mean, unlike the fixtures on Nassau Street, some of which, you know, were listed as being significant in the National Register for the King's Highway, I don't think these fixtures are particularly historic. I don't think that that's a problem. But I do think the height of the fixture is really critical. Even if it means we have to put an extra couple poles for lights or for the cell. And also, in another 5 years, all this cell stuff would probably be totally different again.
Yeah.
And they may all come down and be replaced by something else. I mean, this
Or they'll put them every 5 feet.
yeah, I mean, it could be. There may be a different system which doesn't even require this. I think we have to accept additional poles from time to time, and I think what was decided on Nassau Street would not to replace the existing light fixtures, but to put additional poles probably made sense. But to just put in high poles so we might put things on top when we're not even sure that that will accommodate all the companies and all the cell things that are currently being proposed or will be in the near future.
Well, I agree with Robert that, you know, we're not married to a kind of faux historic design. We really like elegant, simple, and, you know, not like modern isn't necessarily inappropriate.
Yeah.
So it would be good to maybe widen the view of those poles out there.
We can share with the group the different light fixtures and poles that are available from PSE&G, or if you have a smaller subcommittee that you want us to work with, we can do that as well.
Yeah, I just want to let you know that PSC&G actually, I know that oftentimes that we will ask them for what styles they have, and they have a much larger selection than we're aware of. I know someone who works for Philip Lighting that does a lot of their light fixtures in municipalities and highways and things like that. And they said that almost anything that you provide to them, they will take under their umbrella to be a PSC&G. They'll fit it out. And they can also use, if there's a light fixture that currently is not an LED, that it can be converted to one if you wanted to keep that light fixture itself.
Okay, we'll work with you, Elizabeth, to get your contact. Thank you.
I think we had this discussion about the Bank Street lighting 18 months ago, 2 years ago. Again, I'm not good with time. And I think we basically rejected the faux historic look that at least one of the residents had been promoting. And I think we just stuck with the Cobra lights that were there, basically. And we did look at a bunch of different possibilities that PSE&G had, none of which to my memory was fantastic, but that probably has changed since that time, or their selection may have changed.
It hasn't changed too much, but like Elizabeth said, we'll push the envelope and see what other fixtures they can bring into their repertoire.
Okay, one last thing we haven't talked about is wayfinding. So I think, is there a wayfinding package? Like there's a one vendor that's doing all the wayfinding, or?
We will ultimately get to that point. We are not there yet. We had begun work with a graphic designer to start laying something out, and then the process never moved along, and so we're going to restart that process. And the idea is that it can be built upon. So we'll have it in the downtown area, but the idea is that we could also expand it to the roads and coming into Princeton from Route 1, 206, those areas. And so we don't have much to show right now, but we just wanted to bring it to your attention that we are looking to do something with it. There was the image from the streetscape guidelines. I don't know if that's ultimately the design that we want to go with, which was the black background with the white lettering, something similar to what the university is doing. Or if the idea is maybe doing a reverse with white background, black lettering. Any guidance, any feedback on that's appreciated. I can put up the screen just so you can see what was in the streetscape.
Okay.
It's at the far left side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think we looked at that before, we commented on that. And yeah, I think we were, pretty much okay with the black background with the white lettering. I don't know if anyone else remembers that, but this looks, I remember reviewing this.
So one of the comments was on the fluted pole that it was excessive and just to use a simpler base. So is there any issue of just using a straight tube without a special base to it?
Not conceptually, I'd have to see it.
Okay.
Powder black.
Powder black, yep.
Mm-hmm.
Throw a dash note on top, we're in business.
Oh, right. Because that's what we're saying for the DAS nodes is also straight powder black pole. I mean, it'd be good to kind
I
of
was just kidding,
coordinate
sorry.
that.
Well, I think you can see an example of the no base right in that picture at the parking garage. With
Yes.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that blue sign was one version or one idea. It was in keeping with the theme that we had with the parking meters and the different time limits. So while it's shown in this picture, we are definitely not married to that version. The green sign with the white P, that's what Palmer Square has used. I don't know if that's necessarily what we want to use all over town, or if we can use it because Palmer Square has it on their garages for public parking. Again, I think just an example for a space saver.
Well, definitely, I think the green background with the white P is a sort of universal symbol for parking. I don't know, in a lot of cities I've been to, that's what I've seen for parking.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments?
I just want to make a comment. I think when Palmer Square came in for their signage application, that they did design it specifically to access, as an identification to access their parking lot.
Okay.
But I mean,
So
if the town wanted to use a green background with the white P, I mean, Palmer Square doesn't have a copyright on that or anything.
Yeah, there is an MUTCD, Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Does have a standard sign that has the green background with a white P, so it would just be similar colors, just different styling.
Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, that's a little less confusing.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other comments on wayfinding? The black background with the white lettering.
Guess if we already approved it, it just seems so grim to me. So
I mean,
no other examples to look at really, so that.
O'Neill leads a group of landlords who want inspectors to focus efforts on slumlords, not reputable renters.
I'm fine, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Whatever,
All right.
whatever's done, I think it should be consistent and attractive and have a little sense of branding, Princeton branding. And I think maybe Palmer Square might appreciate it if we did differentiate our signage a little bit from them. They're a good tenant, owner in the center of town, and I think we ought to be a little bit respectful of their desire to distinguish themselves as, you know, a sort of a place within the downtown. So I would say I would try to make the wayfinding a little bit different from Palmer Square.
Mhm.
And I can't say what that would look like, but I'm sure there must be some good wayfinding packages out there that are coordinated and can be used.
I disagree. I think it's more important for the town to be unified rather than divided up in different commercial interests.
Okay, well, I just said I thought what Palmer Square would think, but.
Well, I have to say the university also has their wayfinding package, and they're coming out with all kinds of stuff. But in general, I see a black background with white lettering, and I just think it's simple, easy to read, and kind of goes with the rest of the town. So if I was hoping we could wrap up the discussion of the street improvements and move along to the bus shelter, because I think everybody saw the 4 different photographs of modifications to the bus shelter.
Julie?
Yeah.
David Shore has his hand up.
Yes, go ahead, David.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
All right, let's try this again. The subject of bases, I think that's protect the bottom of the base, bottom of the pole from salt, no shuffling, and things like that. That's one point. But can I just put on the table an idea that I'd like to see some more thoughts about, and that's about one of the most character-defining things about Witherspoon Street, or a couple of blocks of Witherspoon Street, is in the spring with the I think Bradford pears bloom so beautiful, whatever they are.
They're pear trees, I think, aren't they?
Yeah, I thought they were Bradford pear, but whatever. Could one way to solve the stormwater runoff concern and more green, could the areas around the trees be enlarged and put some more plantings there that would hopefully absorb some more of this water? I think it would be a win-win, but I think somebody has to study it. That's it.
Kyle, do you want to chime in here?
Sure, yeah. Part of the green infrastructure that we're proposing would be what they call like a tree grate system. So the tree grate area would be this box that would take in some of that drainage and then filter out, for water quality type purposes, and then that would eventually be piped to like a near inlet or something. And you can run these things in series. That along with, on the curb line, you could do some of these planter boxes or planter areas that do the same thing. So yeah, we're looking into those, and you can retrofit them with a tree grate that that Princeton's been using and stuff like that. So that is definitely an option we are looking at.
Thanks.
No problem.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we definitely want to look at adding green in there, David, and that's part of the benefit of the green infrastructure, is that you can put trees and other greenery within these areas that also treat the runoff.
All right, thank you. So can we move on to the bus shelter? I think, Deanna, I don't know if you have a screen on that, or Elizabeth? Do you
Yep,
have that?
I have it. I can put it up if you want, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
If you have it, that's great.
Yep. Let me get my screen working for me.
Jenna, do you need us for this conversation? Is this the bus shelter that's going on in Witherspoon Street, or is it something else?
No, this is our flagship bus shelter. People are running into it, so we needed to come up with a new solution. So we don't need you, Tejal and Kyle. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, so the flagship bus shelter has been installed on Nassau Street at Palmer Square. And as I mentioned, we have a few people that have been running into it. We're going to keep monitoring it, but if this is a reoccurring issue, we'd like some guidance on treatments to the glass that we can put in so people do not run into it. Right now, we have yellow caution tape that circles the 3 sides of the bus shelter. It's not very attractive. So one option, we're trying to keep it simple. So we're trying to look at something very low key to put on the glass that is visible enough that people recognize that there are sides to the structure and they don't walk into it, but not be too garish. So this was our best attempt with Photoshop. So we have 4 options. The first one is to look at something like a 6-foot wide film strip in 2 locations, top and bottom on the structure. When this structure was proposed, one of the big selling points was the sleekness of it and the unobstructed views. So the placement of the film would be in locations that if you're in the structure looking for your bus, your visibility would not be obstructed. So this is the first option. Second option is just to do a wider strip, like 1 or 2 foot wide down near the bottom, almost like a privacy panel. But again, if you're sitting on the bench, you would still be able to see out. Third option is just adding in the name of the bus stop, like Palmer Square, on the shelter. And then the fourth option would be to use the municipal logo. Again, it would be a transparent logo, not, the intention is not to be solid and colored. So those were the 4 options that your engineering team came up with. We again welcome feedback and any other suggestions that you might be able to give us. I said, oh, we should put in the bird decals, and my husband cringed. So, so please, Robert, I see you're ready to give me advice.
Some 50 years ago or so, I worked on an office building in Boston, and we had the same problem. People ran right in. It was a major law office and so on, and we had to put some sort of little things. We ended up putting sort of dots and so on. But I think that in a way, these things could be combined. I think that the band really only needs to be about 6 inches deep, but it should be at handrail height, which is then people can still see over, but also even a small child will see it, and on all sides. Just putting the bus stop etched in on or the thing, there's still large areas that aren't going to be seen. However, I think it's also not a bad idea to have the bus stop name there. And what I would suggest is doing what the bus stops on each side, the municipal logo in the back, and then a 6-inch bar at handrail height on all 3 sides. and that even a child would see that and an adult would see it, and it doesn't block off a person walking from seeing through the thing or a person sitting down.
I would agree with all that except for having both the name and the logo. I don't know. To me, I think the name is enough. Or the logo, either one.
Well, there's two things. One is that it's a good thing for people to see what the bus stop is. But I think that the logo also does give something that it is Princeton. And so if you have on either side, you have the Palmer Square, the name of the station, and then in the back you have that. But the real safety factor will be a 6-inch band at handrail height on all three sides. That's what that does.
Yeah, and doesn't the bus shelter have the logo on the front of it? Or was that not put up?
No, it has it on the top on the sides. I don't think the photo
doesn't show
it.
anything.
No, so it under the barrel roof on each end, we do have it. You can see it right there, the little round end of under the barrel roof. We've put a decal there of the municipal logo on each end. And we do have this box on the back side of the glass that accepts maps or other posters in it. And that is visible from the back side.
I think the Princeton logo is really only necessary in one place, and the back is the place to put it. I don't think it's necessary on the ends. But I do think that there's something for safety features. There does have to be a band that's on all three sides. People will walk into it, and a small child can run into it and won't see the one that's up high.
Right.
And the big band sort of destroys the openness of the whole thing.
2 cents.
That has nothing to do with historic preservation, really.
One thing to keep in mind with I agree with just about everything Robert says. As far as the logo is concerned, it's all going to be backwards and you're approaching it from the other side.
Right.
So you could keep the so-called tree, the Mercer blob in the middle, and I don't think most people would recognize it was reversed, but you'd have to have something solid all the way around with the lettering on it from front and alternatively from the back.
Yeah.
Okay. Tom, did you have a comment on that?
It was pretty much the same. Just noted that it would be backwards on one side. I think Robert's right about the handrail height, and probably 6 inches is more than enough. I'd just suggest that frosted glass may be enough to do. I think that's what you had intended to do with the logos and the name of the station. So I would just suggest that for the band as well.
Okay. So
Now,
all of it would be frosted.
If in fact, in the inside, it's possible to see the station name at the ends already now, then I don't think that station names on the side are necessary. It was only because I didn't see them, and I thought that there should be some recognition for somebody sitting there of where they are, because people who get off the bus often aren't people or aren't necessarily people who are local people.
Okay, there's another question, and this has to do with taking a bus stop that's over by Fitzrandolph Gate and shifting it towards the intersection, well, basically across the street from Charles Schwab. So it would shift from near the University Gate towards Washington Avenue. And the question is, if we're using this bus stop as a prototype, do they do they need to come back to us, or can we just say our comments on the bus stop and then they can shift it with this prototype over to their new location?
Yes, they should do that.
Okay. All right.
There may not be the issue with people running into it in that location, right? Because
There's always an issue with people running into it, unfortunately. Yeah.
I guess people are just not looking where they're going.
Yeah.
Well, they have the phone, you know.
And
so-
children in particular, they just run all over the place.
I personally like the bird idea, Deanna. I think some birds.
Thank you.
How about tigers, little tigers? all over?
Yeah, like a colored screened illustration of something that could be changed seasonally or.
Keep it simple.
Yeah, but no, I think the handrail
All right.
height and wide enough so that it's visible. But I think that will get you what you need. I see Michael has his hand up.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Hi, everybody. Lurking
Hi.
this evening, but I really do like Robert's overall sort of graphic package for the shelters. I think it really makes sense. I like the idea of adding the name of stop because a bus shelter is sort of like a transit station, and it's good for people to know where they are within the downtown. And if you're comfortable with that and you're comfortable with the university and the municipality installing the exact same structure in this new location where they want to do it at that unnamed gate that's across from Charles Schwab, it's kind of across from where Tulane comes into Nassau. That's great that we'll communicate that back to them because I do think it's a good idea to have consistency in street furniture such as these bus shelters. If they're going to be more than one, I think it's kind of nice if it looks like a system that's coordinated.
Oh, yeah.
I agree with that completely.
Yeah. I think there's consensus there, definitely.
Great, thank you all.
I would look on the schedule to see what that stop is called. The stop at Palmer Square on the NJT schedule is called Nassau Street at Palmer Square. Palmer Square does it, obviously, but I would check to see what the schedule calls the stop across the street.
Good point.
Yeah, we'll
It's
do
probably
that.
Princeton University, something like that.
Now, there's one wrench to throw in this is that Scott Covey, who is a member of the Transit Advisory Committee, has a grant from the Transit Trust Fund to add signage and I guess decals to bus shelters. And so one of the ideas he's looking at is a decal that would go on, say, the front fascia or the side fascia of the bus shelter. And so it would indicate what the bus stop name is. So it would say Palmer Square. Is that too much if he moves ahead with his project to put it on the actual black fascia or post of the shelter, and then we have it on the glass as well?
I think in that case, it should probably come back to Julie and Elizabeth to take a look at it, and they can decide whether others need to look at it as well further. But I think that may change things a little bit, and so it should come back.
Okay. All right. So maybe we'll take a measured approach and at least get the 6-inch band in, and then stay tuned for the rest of it. I have some draft documents and I can connect Scott Covey with Elizabeth so that he can present what he's put together so far.
But that would be
Okay, great.
at the uppermost part
Thank you.
of the shelter, right?
Wait, Elric, I think we're having trouble hearing you.
Sorry.
Were you talking?
Yeah, just that it seems like it would be at a height, you certainly couldn't see it from a pedestrian's point of view or from a car window. You might be able to see it from a bus, but that's about it. I guess I know it's a bus shelter.
That has been part of the conversation with Scott, so it would be good to tie in this group as well.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Deanna. Really
All right.
appreciate it.
Thank you, and I think we'll be back next month, right, as we have more information together, and we can share where we are with the concept layout. Is that correct,
Okay.
Elizabeth?
Thank you.
Oh, you're muted.
Wait, Elizabeth, you're on mute.
Sorry, if that timing works for engineering.
I'll confirm with T&M and get back to you.
And Julie, I'm gonna, if the commission's comfortable with this, I'll communicate back to the council that, and who's working with the university, that that consistent model is okay to, you know, to use multiple locations on Nassau Street in the second location that's proposed.
All right. Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. We're going to move on to 180 John Street, and we have one more concept review. And
I'm just going to promote the applicant.
Thank you.
Ms. Clayton, we're going to be moving you to panelist.
Great. Welcome.
Hi, can you see me?
Hi. Yep. Yep. And we can hear you.
Okay, super. Great.
Thank you. So, thanks for coming in. And since this is a concept review, we don't have reports or anything. So if you just want to, do you have the ability to share your screen?
I do. Yeah, I think so. I don't do this often, but I do have something. So,
okay.
Shall I do that?
Yeah, so feel free.
Okay. Do you want me to just to start or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Is this it? All right. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Looks
Okay,
good.
hold on. Let me get bigger. Okay. All right. Can you see this?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So I thought maybe that you had seen some drawings, but in any case, this is a lot. I'll just start right in. This is a lot, 180 John Street. It's a pretty big lot actually in the neighborhood, and the first time I could find a building on it was from the Sanborn map in 1902. It's in the red box. I think I have. I don't know if I can get a cursor or something, but
We can see your cursor.
Okay, that's good. So anyway, this is just sort of for a little bit of historical context that you know, as the years went by, the neighborhood got denser and more buildings came into the neighborhood, and some lots with one building then ended up with two buildings, or there were twins or things like that. So that's kind of what I'm showing you. This particular lot has had a house, and then it's two sheds, and the two sheds lasted until 1906. Then in 1911 there was one shed, and that seemed to continue. That is no longer there now. So these are images that I found at the Historical Society of Princeton that come from the 20s and the 1920s and 1930s. And I'm just showing them to you just to kind of get the idea of sort of, it was dense, the buildings were right up on the street, big rear yards, and that's it. So this is what it is today. Again, a lot of the lots have even been subdivided further, so it's a pretty dense neighborhood, as you all know. And this lot is pretty large and has a lot of empty space around it, as does the lot next door, which I know you know is going to be developed much more intensely than it is now. Also just wanted to give context today where there's a lot of variety of the neighborhood. So, for example, directly across the street from this lot is the Masonic Temple that's now a 4-story apartment building. Next to that is a twin, sort of a double twin house, and then even next to that, there's like a really tiny little house in between another house with a big, with an attic dormer. So just trying to give a little bit of a context of the variety of styles and scales really in the neighborhood. Also along John Street, there are a lot of twins, duplexes, whatever we want to call them. I grew up calling them twins. I think everybody calls them duplexes around here, but really just attached dwellings side by side. And this is, there's the one next door, which will be added onto, and then the building in the back. But again, like similar, very similar. Some are different, some are a little higher, some are a little lower. They've all front porches right up on the street, steps coming up. So this is the lot, a little bit more of a close-up of the Google shot of the lot, and you can see the driveway, and then the existing survey with, the one house, and then a lot of space to the left. And then the proposed site plan next to it, where it's just really adding almost like a twin to it, within a proposed attic story, a little bit of an attic addition that would span both the existing house, which would be maintained and saved and just refurbished, but adding a little bit of space up top.
We can't see that because we're superimposed over it.
Oh, you are? Oh, sorry. Okay, let me.
You can minimize that window.
Yeah, okay. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, is that better?
Unchanged. How can we, David, how do we get our own faces off of there?
You should, there's a way to do it. If you take away the maximized screen, which is in the upper right-hand corner, if you sort of shrink the screen.
You hit the single bar on the furthest left.
I think I got it. Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah, I can see it now.
Good.
Okay, so this also shows that moving, extending the driveway and moving the parking off of the street and into the rear yard, but still maintaining space in the yard as open green space and an area for each dwelling. This is the house as it is now. And then this is a kind of just really concept plan about what it would be to add a dwelling to the left, to the south of it, and then showing the attic addition behind. So it would be, the attic addition would be behind the main roof of the original house and also of the proposed second dwelling. Because just to minimize the view from the street, I really don't think you'd see it very well from the street, because this, when you're standing on the sidewalk, you're looking up at the house. Also, the street is pretty narrow, and it's set pretty far back. So I think that was the idea, just to minimize the view from the street, but still to give both of these units a little bit more living space. Also, the addition of the attic story will allow the second floor of the original house to have a little bit higher ceilings. Right now, the ceilings on the first floor are about 7'9", and the ceilings on the second floor are about 7 feet. So just for the way people prefer to live now, people prefer to have a little bit higher ceilings than that, and adding up on the top would allow me to raise the roof and raise the floor level, the ceiling level, and give the people who would live in this original home a little bit higher ceilings. But the idea would be just to maintain the scale of the original building with the second dwelling, and really pick up the characteristics of the streetscape with the front porch, and give a little bit of variety. And it wouldn't necessarily be exactly the same detailing as the original. I mean, we could do something a little bit more simple, but the idea would be really just to maintain that sort of streetscape as you're walking down the street. It's makes sense. So these are, I'll just go through the architectural plans. I'm not sure if you saw them, but these are the existing plans of the original house, and that would remain. This would be the proposed. So you can see a little bit the demo lines, but it would really be sort of like a mirror image of the house to the south of the original house, but maintain a little bit of difference so that you could see that they're really two different houses. Here are the elevations of the existing, and then the proposed. So I'm just rendering the siding on the original house that would stay. So that's it. Just
Okay.
that's it.
All right.
But I'd love to hear your comments. I mean, really, my idea is to be able to develop the lot and sort of have a little bit of infill on this particularly large lot in this particularly dense neighborhood.
Right. All right. So if you want to stop sharing your screen, we can go back to our.
Sounds good.
Thank you. So comments, suggestions?
I'm pleased with the fact that there's been attention to scale. I've been very concerned about a lot of the projects that have been coming in that just don't take that into account. And the fact that it's not yelling at you on as a novelty. It's respecting the character of the neighborhood.
Thanks.
Okay. Yes, Robert.
Well, as far as the second house is concerned, I would agree with that. But this whole third story and everything else, I think just destroys the whole thing. And I think once again, instead of joining these two houses together, I would prefer to see a separate third house in the back rather than these two houses with this big overwhelming top coming on top of it, this third floor. And I think it's going to be very visible from the street. It's not going to disappear.
All right. Other comments? I mean, I think that the issue is that the second floor on the existing house has ceiling heights of like 7 feet or something. So that's the problem, is that somehow they need to, make ceiling height acceptable, at least on the second floor.
Well, this isn't the way to do it.
I don't know, are there other comments?
I worry about the density of the neighborhood, or the volume of space going in here. It takes away a lot from the open space and the rhythm that's been established.
Yeah, on that score, I'd like to see a drawing that has both the 168, 166, 168 redesign next to this redesign. I mean, that's not really Louise's issue, but it gives a better sense of what the streetscape would look like.
Well, Elizabeth, can you give us any status on 168? What's going on with that?
Remind me which one that is.
The one with the Dutch Colonial.
It's the water tower building. Josh Linder's the architect.
Yes, so it did go to the zoning board and they did approve the application. They did not approve it with the affordable housing unit because they didn't want another variance. So to remove that, I think there were 3 variances eliminated, although they did encourage for one of the units to be affordable housing, but I believe that economically that would not work for the applicant. So that application basically was approved.
So to that point, the house next door is going to have an addition much higher than what Louisa is proposing. So anyway, I would say to reconsider that standing out so much if we've got the house next door And I'm not sure what the height is of that house, but it's probably 35 feet.
I don't recall what the height is, but I know that there was a streetscape analysis that was done by the architect. And I do not believe that there was large objection from the commission on that. I mean, of course, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that there were other items with that application besides that height.
Right. So I'm just saying that, yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Just going to say one thing that was notable in the photos that Louisa showed of the street and the various houses along it was that the gables were, well, they run like the existing house on this particular site, and the second house, the gable is going to be perpendicular. So it'll stand out a bit because of that in its close neighbors. And it's a personal, I suppose, matter of taste. But I really dislike the flat or nearly flat dormers that are put on typically existing houses to gain more space, gain another bedroom or two. So I don't like seeing that on new construction. But it would be difficult, I think, although the architect might be able to manage, to both turn the street frontage of the new house so that the roof is running from street up to, away from street to the ridge, and be able to fit in additional space behind that isn't quite so obviously put in to gain space. I'm not phrasing this very well, but I think there's a way to get the space that she's looking for without that odd looking dormer arrangement.
David Cohen, you had a comment?
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask Louisa a question, and it relates to this comment that Tom made about the way that the direction of the gable changes with the new house. I'm just curious, Louisa, most of the pictures that you showed of precedent for twins, both sides of the twin are always quite symmetrical. And so I'm curious what your thinking was in turning the gable on the addition here.
Well, to be honest, this is a contributing building to the neighborhood, and so I was trying to be cognizant of maintaining that house as somewhat separate from this second dwelling unit. And so by recessing the wall a little bit between the two dwelling units, and by turning the gable the different direction on the second proposed unit, I thought that would allow that original home to sort of almost not really stand alone, but at least be viewed as its own thing. And then the second dwelling unit would be viewed a little bit separately, even though they are attached. But I was trying to be sympathetic to the fact that this is a contributing house in the neighborhood, and not completely envelop it in the new development, so that you no longer really even saw it. And that's also why I think I said that already, why I set the attic story back, because I also didn't want to overwhelm the original building, yet I still wanted to gain a little bit of space on the second floor, but also on the third sort of attic story there. So that was the idea.
How far back is it?
It is, let me tell you, so it is from it's about 20 feet back.
To the
from the porch. What? Sorry?
Could it be recessed even further?
I can't really hear you very well, Elric.
I'm sorry,
Oh.
could it be recessed even further?
So he's
Could it be
asking if
recessed
it could
even
be
further?
Yeah.
Well, you know what I'm doing? I'm setting it behind the main volume of the front volume of the house. So could it be recessed back further? Possibly, but that's where I run into the ceiling height issue. Because I can make that front room a cathedral ceiling for a bedroom, but then I run into a problem as I get into the back of the house with like bathrooms and things like that. So that's why I kind of wanted to keep it there.
Well,
Yeah, Robert, you had a comment?
The back of the house is not going to be visible. And although I would agree that this sort of shed roof dormer is never very attractive and when it can be seen. But if it's in the back, it wouldn't be seen and one could take care of the bathrooms there. And then, as Elric said, use a sort of more of a cathedral ceiling for the first. But I think also what is also a problem here is that although there's a slight recess of this new structure that's added, this third, it's very shallow, really, and I think that the houses don't really will not read in it's totally separate. I really think that it's this third story and everything else is just overwhelming.
Well, I guess we need to give Louisa some direction here. This is a concept review. So, so Tom, you're saying that changing the roof orientation, even though one house is original and one house would be new, is preferable? Or did you get the reasoning why Louisa didn't want to do that?
I still think it's preferable from a visual standpoint. It makes the designing a little more difficult, I think, but I think the end product may be better.
All right, so maybe if the roof orientation of the new house were similar to the original house, then there was something like color where one would recede more than the other, like maybe that would differentiate them a little bit more. But I understand Louisa's point. I mean, she doesn't want to create a fake historic building. She wants to put the attention on the original building.
I think throughout the neighborhood, not all the houses have the roof line running in the same direction. Some of them are turned the other way. I don't find that as much of a problem as this whole third structure that's put on top of the two. That's what I think is really the problem. I don't see that the second house with the roof going in the other direction is, I mean, it could go either way, but I don't think that's a problem. But I do think the other is, really.
Well, I'm just thinking about the presentation at 186 and the fact, like Josh was showing sight lines from the street of his addition in the back and saying that it wasn't visible. And so I'm just wondering, because that addition has to be at least as high as what Louise is proposing. So I'm just kind of wondering if
that addition would have been visible.
Well, no, and that was approved. So that is actually going to be constructed.
We didn't really approve it.
No, but zoning did.
Yeah, zoning did, but that certainly, that zoning, we should not take our clues from zoning.
No, I'm just saying that's what's going to be there next to this house. So we should at least take that into account.
But I think it's the view from the street that's particularly important. And
Right.
I think with bringing this whole third structure almost to line with the other two buildings, the new second building and the original building, instead of keeping them really separate from with a deep space between them, is a real problem.
Julie, I just want to suggest that, some ground level perspective views will certainly help the board understand really what's visible of that third story and what's not. I'm sure, Louisa, you would have done that anyway, but those the two-dimensional elevation views are always misleading in terms of what you can really see, because everything's in the same plane, and that's not how things are in reality.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess that would be the best thing is, a perspective from the street with the little angle of a person's eye and what would be visible and what wouldn't.
I know when Josh brought in the plan for the house next door, we all agreed that there should have been more of this dialogue beforehand. He brought it in as a fully baked, and it met with nobody's approval, at least from our board. But so if there's any way of working with Louisa on this, as she addresses some of our concerns, I think that would be terrific.
Yeah, I agree, because we didn't have control over the other project. It was approved and it's going to be built whether we liked it or not.
I have a question. How far back, I left my plans out in the car and you went through them, but how far back from the main roof is the three-story addition? Is it atop the rear section of the original roof, or is it set back behind the original part of the house above an addition? I'm not sure. I think it should be pushed. The new addition that's 3 stories should be pushed back behind the houses. I think that will make it less visible from the street, but I just don't recall, and I don't have the plans are out in my car, and I didn't want to leave the meeting for 10 minutes to go pull them out of the back seat of the car. I was reading them while my daughter was driving to the train station. I've had such a busy day. I've just been trying to.
No problem. Yeah, no problem. So it's about 20 feet back and it does not come back. I mean, it's that whole front volume is intact and then the wall comes up behind. So it's about 20 feet back from the street. And as you know, the street is pretty narrow and you're already on a slope. So I absolutely agree. I'll do a perspective view of what you would see from the street. But I will say that the house up the hill, which is the 166, 168, is going to be higher, and also it's up the hill from this property, so it's going to feel even higher. So, and then across the street directly, of course, is the Masonic building, which is a very, very, very high. Right, so there is height in the neighborhood, and then there's also the university's development behind that, which I know is much further back, but you do still see that in the distance, those much higher buildings, and I know that Josh Zinder showed all that in his renderings, and so I will try to put something together like that also to show that. But yeah, this is actually, I was trying to keep the height as low as I could, but still get some really usable space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would only say that you still have a pretty good lot there, and I appreciate that because they're going to obliterate that next door. But will the back rooms, other than the bathrooms, have a view of that lot, or is it possible to work it so that they do, when the bathrooms are sort of an interim factor between the front and back of the house or houses?
So I'm sorry, you're just wondering about the view of from these units to the new.
Looked at the garden as opposed to I can't quite, I don't have plans in front of me.
Okay. So, well, the houses are very linear. I mean, they're just right, they're the way right now they're right next to each other. So, the original house, most of the windows are going to look to the north, down the hill, and the proposed on the left side, most of those, windows, that side will look south to the new development at 166, 168. There are windows to the backyard, of course. At the moment, one of them is a bathroom, but 2 bedrooms also look to the backyard, and so yeah, I mean there is views to the backyard, definitely.
All right, so do we have any more suggestions for Louisa?
Madam Chair, Mr. Shore has had his hand up, but I'm not sure if that was left over from before.
David, did you have comments? I'm not hearing him.
He muted himself.
Unmute.
Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
I guess it's just that same concern about just the bulk of all of this so tightly together. I mean, it's a large lot. I just wondered if a different approach could have been used. It seems like this is not what I thought we were trying to preserve in this neighborhood of modest houses, that yards that were important to the houses, whether it's doing activities outdoors or something. And it just seems like we're taking away even that character from the neighborhood. Laundry hanging and people playing in yards and stuff. It just seems like we're taking up so much volume, or we're putting in so much new volume. That's, I guess, the more general concern about all the houses.
So, but I'm actually not, this proposed unit is no bigger, footprint wise than the existing home. And actually, this proposal fits within the zoning. So it's not, I'm not asking for more bulk or more living space than is what's allowed on the lot. And I, made a big effort to do that because my intention is not to build some big McMansion here in the middle of this beautiful historic neighborhood. So anyway, I'm not, it still has a very large backyard actually. And although, some of it will be taken up a little bit by the parking, but I also thought that it was important to get the parking off the street and move it to the rear to really maintain that streetscape and not have a bunch of cars parked in the front, and just have really the front porches be the main thing.
Well, and John Street is such a narrow street that, yeah, any way to get the cars off the street, I think is a really good thing.
Yeah.
So as far as suggestions for Louisa, so definitely if there's a way to put the addition further back, if there can be perspectives to show what's visible to the street. I think we're kind of mixed on whether or not the roof orientation on the new house matters or not. I think there's different opinions there. Are there other suggestions for Louisa? So I think that's about it. So if there's, I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. I really appreciate you looking at this initially. Helps a lot.
Yeah. And then also, yeah, I don't know if you can get, maybe through Elizabeth, information on what's proposed next door, just so you have that, or that you have the information on what was approved, so you know what that will look like.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had one other comment. If you, along with turning the gable around, if that's the way you go, I noticed that the fenestration was different from side to side. if the gable turns, I think maybe you'd want to look at the, I'm torn about, I'm torn between your desire to keep the houses distinct and the appropriateness of them looking different. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe you can explore either option.
Well, didn't Tom's suggestion of turning the roof the other way referred to the third floor, did it not?
No.
That was the front of the.
Oh, just the front, okay.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So I will say that you know, it also helps me to turn the gable because, like I said, the floor to floors are very low in the original home. And in the new dwelling, I would not want to build 7'9" first floor and 7 foot second floor. So I'm going to raise the roof of the second unit will be higher than the original.
If I could interject, I think the grade running uphill from north to south, I think is the direction, may make that not very noticeable. I mean, the fact that you're increasing the floor to floor height, and that the call it the gutter, the eave of the house will definitely be 2 or 3 feet above the existing, but I think that will be okay.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments, suggestions? Okay, well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you bringing plans in at this stage because it helps us so much, you know, instead of having a fully baked application and then going through this. It's much, much easier. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate your time.
Okay, thanks. All right, we're on to public comment. Elizabeth, do we have anyone from the public?
I don't see anyone at this point who has their hand up.
Okay, well, I think that's it for our meeting. If there's a motion to adjourn.
So moved. I'll second.
Okay, so I think Tom moved and Roger seconded, and all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And I will see everybody next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks a
All
lot.
right.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.